Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Dissidents and Dictators, the flagship podcast from the Human Rights Foundation. Alongside my globe-trotting co-host, Elisha Maldonado. Say hi, Elisha.
Hiya.
We have a fun episode for you today. We'll be chatting with Jay Nordlinger, a senior editor at National Review, and one of the few journalists who's been covering the threats of dictatorships around the world for decades. A man who has been on this beat long before many, even any, of us joined. We'll be talking about all the lessons he's learned and where the fight against dictatorship goes from here. So strap in, because we've got a good one. Elisha, welcome back. Where have you been?
Thank you. I have been in Norway and Sweden. I was supposed to go to Lithuania, and I ended up in Sweden instead. Brought back a cold with me, so it was a great time.
Did you get to bring back anything else? Any delicious Swedish chocolate?
No, I didn't think of that. But I think I probably picked up the cold now that I think about it on top of a winter boat tour.
Well, yeah, I would say a boat tour off the coast of Sweden in the middle of winter, that's a good spot for
Yeah,
a cold.
you know, I like the cold. You know, this is kind of one of my things. I love it. But we were on the top of this boat, and I thought I may have met my match.
Now, Jay, you have traveled through Scandinavia before.
I figure Elisha was welcoming NATO, Sweden to NATO, that is. Yeah.
Right, you
It was perfectly timed.
You ushered Sweden into the alliance. Good for you.
I did, thank you. Yeah. I was going to be humble about that, Jay, but
We'll send you to Ukraine, Bosnia, and Kosovo next.
I've been to Bosnia, and I'd love to go back again, and I'd love to hit the others.
Jay, you have traveled all over. You've been writing about international news.
You said earlier, I thought you were going to say before most of us were born.
Oh, no.
Which I think would have been right.
Well, let's get into this. Let's back up. You're originally from Ann Arbor,
Yes.
Michigan.
Yes.
Beautiful this
Love
time
Michigan.
of year. Clearly a hotbed for those that eventually end up dedicating their careers to talking about and writing about the threats, the scourge of modern dictatorship, what can be done about it. Where did that transition happen? We don't have hours and hours, but how does one go from Ann Arbor to beginning this lifelong career, obsession, pursuit of writing about these threats that certainly so much of us at Human Rights Foundation focus on?
Well, sir, Ann Arbor is a very international town. It's a university town with people from all over. I grew up with lots of refugees from Europe and elsewhere. There are lots of foreign languages. I suppose that had something to do with it, and one's parents and grandparents, and they were curious about the great broad world and knew a fair amount about it. And yeah, I suppose this question would require self-reflection, which is dangerous.
Doesn't Michigan have a huge Muslim population, one of the biggest in the States?
Southeastern Michigan has the largest Arab population outside the Middle East.
Dearborn.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Ann Arbor, let's back up even further. Were your parents...
So one learned about Chaldeans and others. Chaldeans were famous shop owners in southeastern Michigan when I was growing up.
Was there an academic connection as well to the university?
They both attended the university and met and married and lived there, but they didn't work for the university. No.
Very good. So there was this incredible ferment, these incredible conversations and exposure, even in Ann Arbor, to this broader world.
I'm not sure I like that word "even," Casey. Do you know what I mean?
Take him on,
This is
Jay.
not podunk, sir. Where are you from, young man?
I have an uncle who went to
where do you-
Michigan State. I'm supposed to say these things.
I grew up in Wyoming, so I'd probably get an even as well, except I think that there's a lot less international community in Wyoming. Not.
Oh, we're 5 minutes in. We're already ragging on Ann Arbor.
Even in Ann Arbor. That's the title of the podcast, I would think. Yeah.
Ragging
Yeah.
on Ann Arbor?
Yeah. How did I emerge from such a benighted little place?
Such a backwater. But this is something, again, Jay, we wanted to have you on because you've been doing this for as long as you have at this point.
Well, it's not just longevity, is it, Casey? I mean,
No,
there's
but
a
it's
certain
quality as well.
Thank you. It's yeah.
Doing it so well for as long as you
I've
have.
taken a beating this morning, Elisha.
I know.
Keep going, Casey. Yeah. Yeah. You're on because you're old, Jay. Thanks a time. You've done it for so long.
There is a wake, there is a
Nothing about-
legacy you have created
That's better. Nice recovery.
that
Okay.
those of us, certainly at the Human Rights Foundation, are following in. That we are excited
That's better.
to learn from and learn about. Was this directly related to Cold War politics that drew you in?
In all seriousness, for all of my BSing, every once in a while I'm asked, why are you so interested in human rights? And I just don't know. I think, who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? It's unanswerable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It just didn't.
One is or one isn't.
It's just an is, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I could reflect on this, but it would, I don't know, it would sound self-important.
I think it's a sense of justice, of right and wrong, the world as it should be and as it could be. And I think that's one of the reasons the three of us are journalists. I think that journalists get into that for a reason. You see as it could be, should be, and you report it as it is, but it shouldn't be that way. So let's write that out. But then getting more into human rights, let's defend these things, these values that we hold to be true, deep. And I think that they're innate, if anyone paused to really think about them, that these values of freedom, are just there.
Well, it's something I've discovered, I'm sure you have too. Very, very few people in this world care about freedom, democracy, and human rights across the board. They care about it for some and less for others. And this is one reason I admire HRF so much. HRF is for freedom, democracy, and human rights for everybody and against dictatorships of all stripes, tyranny of all stripes, whether the boot stamping on the face is red, black, or some other color. This is a very rare thing. There are people who applaud me when I write about, say, human rights in China or Iran or Cuba, and who don't applaud when I write about human rights in Russia, Turkey, Egypt, so on. So there's always this great selectivity about this, but not here, not in this shop, which is very gratifying.
Yeah, and when I was at the New York Post and I was writing about Turkey quite a bit, I was often met with, well, why are you writing about that? And I go, well, look what's going on.
A lot of money's involved, for one thing.
That's true.
Absolutely.
A lot of Americans on the Turkish payroll.
Yeah.
More than one would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's the Turks, whether it's the Saudis, whether it's the Emiratis. Or even to an extent China as well.
Lots of dough involved.
That brings us into the entire lobbying and PR apparatus in Washington as well. But that's a side conversation. Jay, bringing it back to your career, when did you begin at the National Review?
Well, I started out at the Weekly Standard in Washington. Excuse me. And choking on my words, I'm so moved. And that was a wonderful experience. And moved to National Review in the previous century, in 1998, here in New York. And William F. Buckley Jr., the founder of the magazine, was a great friend, and I loved him.
I wish I could have met that one.
A great, great man from whom I learned a lot. I mean, not just, in person, in the flesh, but over the years, well before that, through reading.
And at the time when you began, was this the beat that you were focused on? Because I'm sure we'll get into this in the conversation.
I'll sound like a real jerk. I am beatless. It sounds almost tawdry. No, I am a generalist. And I do reporting, I do profiles, but I've done a lot in the world of foreign affairs and a lot in the world of, as the late Robert Conquest said, non-consensual societies, dictatorships. Yeah, and in part, people would ask me long ago, why do you write so much about Cuba and the democracy movement there and human rights there and political prisoners? And a big answer was because so few others are doing so. Other things are covered. Other situations are covered, but I saw a gap there, a dearth. So here was something I could contribute. And I do, this will sound pompous, but I do like to shine a light on places that are dark. This will sound weird to you. I had a great friend, a very elegant Southern lady, who said she liked to get to the stores, the department stores, well before Christmas, say in November, before everything's picked over. I like to write about things before they're picked over. And if others want to join in, great.
Yeah.
Great. One could use the help. But this will sound braggadocious, I was writing about the Uyghurs, and people said, what's a Uyghur? That's a funny word. Right. Now it's not as necessary, which is wonderful.
Right.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. I remember my first piece on what Beijing was doing to the Uyghur population would have been back in 2012. And even at that time...
You were pre-me, my friend.
Early 2010s, right?
Yeah.
I had the advantage of, I used to live and work in Kazakhstan, and there was a substantial Uyghur population there, which was my exposure and my experience.
Were you the northernmost Peace Corps?
I was.
Was northern? Is that the word?
I believe male. I believe there was one female volunteer. Who was
okay.
Further north than my one claim to fame. But this ability to, maybe it's not even an ability, this desire to, and again, getting back to this kind of natural gravitation toward, identify those causes, certainly those populations, those regimes, that so few are paying attention to, so few are focused on, for any number of reasons, provides an advantage when the news flares up, when other audiences are brought into this, that allows your words, your conversation, your commentary, and your analysis to take on an even more elevated kind of plane, be able to reach that many more readers, that many new audiences to inform them. I was wondering, and again, I suppose that's what HRF does as well. We've been doing this since
Let me say on this point, if I may, Casey, that I owe great thanks to the Human Rights Foundation and the Oslo Freedom Forum, who have introduced me to persons and situations that I hadn't known anything about. And I think of Togo and that glorious young woman we have at our forums. And now I know a bit about Togo. It's all bad, but I'm glad to know about it. Or Equatorial Guinea. And so what, people say? Well, either you're interested or you're not. And, to each his own. And we all are interested in this kind of thing. And if others aren't, let them do their own thing.
And as we know in the 21st century, these dictatorships do not remain behind their borders, do not remain
often not
influential only to those domestic polities, are all too often looking to expand their reach, their interests, and their influence itself.
Look at the coalition against Ukraine. Russia, of course, China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, Hamas. The gang's all there. Ukraine needs allies as well. The dictatorships, I found, tyrannies are very good at allying with one another. Democracies are much less good.
Than fierce independence in democracies, perhaps. Maybe. I was going to bring up a couple of pieces of your writing. One, because I love how you write. Maybe some Buckley-esque feel to it, but you get to the heart of things so quickly.
Thank you. The check is in the mail, Elisha. Thank you very much.
You write about complicated things so beautifully and succinctly, and I think that as the Count of Monte Cristo says, my favorite book, that perfection is simplicity or simplicity is perfection, and you just to distill something down so.
Say that again so I can get it. It went by too fast.
Perfection. Simplicity is perfection. Or perfection is simplicity. I can't remember which of the order, but either way, it's.
I'll quote to you a Shaker hymn that you know, popularized by Copeland. "'Tis the gift to be simple."
Yes. Yeah. I love it. So you're able to just, get to the heart of these things. And so of all of your writings, I just chose two because it was too hard to choose many of them. But I also like the quotes that you get out of people, and one is from our very own Garry Kasparov. But I'm going to read about Ji Song-ho first. And you write in bulleted form in some of these reports and dispatches you do from, but you write that Ji Song-ho is one of my favorite people. A lot of others feel the same way about him. He is a phenomenally brave North Korean defector, or escapee. He lost an arm and a leg. I'm speaking literally. His grandmother died of starvation. His father was tortured to death. Song-ho, it seems to me, is always cheerful. I have seen him many times over the past several years, and his countenance is always cheerful. Indeed, he expresses an ebullience. I ask him how he's doing, body and soul. Okay, he says. If he were suffering, I'm not sure he would let it show. That is just so beautiful.
What a guy. What a guy.
Paragraph. What a guy. What a guy. And I love this one. It's a little longer, so I just cut it down. You were talking to Garry Kasparov, our chairman, and of course, the greatest.
Hey, hang on, Elisha. You've edited me?
I did.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
I mean, it's already hard to do. But
Check is in the mail.
See the indignation on my face. Yeah, go ahead.
Kasparov, I admire no end, for this reason, among others. He doesn't have to be doing any of this. He doesn't have to campaign for freedom, democracy, and human rights around the world, exposing himself to risk, from the Kremlin in particular. He could have spent his years as a great retired chess champion, the chess legend, receiving accolades from one and all. When I mentioned this once, he responded, "I've never wanted to be a statue. For one thing, just think what pigeons do to it." I love that quote so much. But I love the way you get to
Thank you,
the
Elisha.
heart of it.
Could I add something to that?
Yes, please.
So I have long said, Garry doesn't have to be doing this. He corrected me once on this. He sort of rebuked me once on this. He said, "Yes, I do." And I understood him.
Yeah.
I understood him till he didn't need to say anything else. conscience compels him.
Yes, absolutely.
There's still a voluntary aspect as we see it, but as he sees it, there's not.
Yes, absolutely.
And so many times I've interviewed so many former political prisoners, future political prisoners, and even once a current political prisoner who was on the lam, a Cuban. And I've often asked, why do you do what you do? Why do you take these risks and so on? Almost never can they answer. They just shrug and say, I can do no other. I can't help it.
Which also gets us back to what we were talking about earlier, about how you ended up writing on, covering, analyzing.
Well, if you have a
space.
platform, I write about a lot of light, trivial things. I love writing about language, and I love writing about sports. Not that that's trivial, and music. I'm the music critic of the New Criterion. But if you have an outlet or two, if you have a platform, my goodness, take advantage of it.
When I was at the Post, I think I may have said this to Casey in another podcast, but we read three editorials a day, and it was and I wanted to do the foreign affairs beat, and so I convinced my editor to give that to me at some point. And whenever I could just write about political prisoners whose names that no one would know, that don't have the name recognition of Jimmy Lai, and just write them because what the Chinese don't want you to do, what the Russians don't want you to do is to name these people that they're trying to, kill in front of you, but not.
Here's something name-droppy, Elisha. Charles Krauthammer told me that long ago, Meg Greenfield, the great editorial page editor of the Washington Post, had it almost as a rule that Sakharov would be mentioned in her pages at least once a week, so as to help keep him alive.
Yeah. I think it's important to write about these things.
We should say Vladimir Karamurza every other sentence.
We should.
Folks may not be aware if they haven't been to our office, but we have a, 6 foot, 7 foot tall painting of Vladimir Karamurza. Jay will show you on the walkout. I'm not sure
I
if you
saw it. One of the greatest men of our time.
Absolutely, certainly one of the bravest. As if he could be braver. I mean, especially now.
Was it? I think you may have written about this yesterday. It's moved into after Navalny is now the foremost Russian.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Oleg Orlov, Ilya Yashin, but Karamurza, yes. They tried to kill him twice with poison. Some of his friends beseeched him not to go back to Russia. He said, basically, I can do no other.
Jay,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to, again, bring things back to your career, your writing in this space. I want to ask you kind of maybe a grander question, but then bring things back to some of the specific works you've done. You began 1998 in National Review. You mentioned a moment ago talking about how you, and it's funny because I feel like maybe I, to an extent, have the same kind of phenomenon where you're able to, you have a desire to see a cause or see a situation, see a problem, whatever it may be, within the broader rubric of modern dictatorship that so few others are paying attention to at the time. Does it feel like a less lonely space these days? Or are there still elements, causes, areas, nations, regimes that you focus on, that you write about, that still seem especially lonely on your end?
Bill Buckley used to quote something. That question's like Peking duck, requires 24 hours notice. I'll have a wonderful answer later. Does it feel less lonely? I don't know, Casey. Glad y'all are here.
Yeah.
We're happy to join you. No, okay, more particularly, you've written a few books.
Casey,
I can't believe you pulled that out of Michigan.
People who are sort of...
Even out of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, people who
Can you imagine?
People sort of slighted. You seldom hear about the Arab political prisoners. Seldom.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I think it's probably people think, the Arab world, they ought to have dictatorships. That's what they're born for.
That's what they're known for.
I quote Bernard Lewis, who said, there are people who say that Arab peoples are destined to be ruled by dictatorship, and freedom, democracy, and human rights are not for them. And Lewis would say slyly, that is known as the pro-Arab view. I loved it when he said that. But no, they're heroic prisoners, including, I believe, at least 2 U.S. citizens in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. They don't ask to be heroic, mind you. They didn't set out to be. They wouldn't consider themselves that. But gosh, yeah, go ahead, Casey.
No, I was going to say, you're exactly right. You know, it's funny, jailings in Saudi Arabia. Jay, maybe you saw a week or two ago some of the American consulting firms that are working hand in glove with the Saudi regime.
Must be rolling in it.
Oh, they're doing just fine. But of course, when a congressional subpoena comes in for information about what McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, Teneo, and so forth are actually doing for the Saudis, they say our hands are tied because our employees may be jailed by the Saudi regime if we disclose any information about what we're doing.
Fancy that.
Yes. Yeah. As I was talking with someone else the other day about this, perhaps they should have consulted someone about that ahead of time. But I digress. Jay, you've written a few books, some that compile your writing, your essays. I wanted to ask about two in particular. One about the Nobel Peace Prize, and two more particular to my heart, my interests, those on the children of dictators themselves. Let's begin with the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, we have the connection to Oslo itself. What was the thesis of that book? What was the reception to that book when it first came out? What, about 10 years ago or so?
Well, I think that the most gratifying thing said about it was said by John Bolton in a review. He said, "This is a history of the Peace Prize, true, but it's also a book-long meditation on peace. What is peace? What is the nature of peace? It's more than the absence of war, of course, but it's not war either. What is peace? A very slippery concept." That really pleased me because I hope it's true about that book. Yeah, what is peace anyway? And it's a very juicy subject. It allows you, it gives you an overview of the 20th century and now about a quarter of the 21st. Gives you a parade of interesting personalities, not all of them admirable, but all of them interesting. As I think I said at the time, not a dullard in the bunch.
How did you set upon that? You know, what kind of, jump-started that idea to write about?
The most controversial prize.
I was in Albania, as one is.
Yes.
And
I want to go.
Nice young man from a government ministry was showing me around. And it occurred to me to ask about Enver Hoxha and whether he had children. And if so, what were their lives like?
This is the Children of Dictators book.
Are we talking about the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, they blend.
Yeah. Either one, you just go on.
I don't think Enver ever
we're
won
along
the
for the
Nobel
ride.
Prize.
So I wasn't in Albania.
God.
Dear one,
Yes.
I can't remember. I can't remember. I was pivoting to another subject, just saying my lines like a robot.
Pivot to that subject, that's fine.
program and something, and a switch got loose or something like that.
You know what happens to the best of us, and we can just cut that little bit and just pivot
the
about.
beauty of podcasting.
No, heavens no. Warts and all, please. Leave it in.
No, we're fine giving Talia, our wonderful producer, more work.
Leave it in, warts
Of course.
and all.
Well, on that note then, Jay, let's turn to the Children of Dictators, because this is the one I really wanted to talk
The
about.
book's Children of Monsters.
Yes, Children of Monsters. This is, again, music to my heart, music to HRF's heart. Not every child that you identify in this book of, what was it, 24 different dictators? Something like that.
Yeah.
Is a monster unto themselves. Certainly some of them are, and figures like Papa Doc and Baby Doc come to mind. I don't even know what to ask you. I mean,
Baby Doc wasn't a monster. That's one reason he sort of failed as dictator. Yeah,
He wasn't monster
He
enough?
didn't have quite the dictatorial mettle.
Is that a through
didn't have the
line for some of these children? I mean, I imagine
Well,
when you grow up in such a cosseted atmosphere, like being the son or the daughter of.
he was a
throne.
spoiled little rich boy, Baby Doc, and it's sort of not his fault. But Papa Doc was a real brute and killer and monster, and his natural successor was his daughter Denise, and who worked alongside her father. But girls don't become dictators, and so it was. I'm sorry we call him Baby Doc so often. I can't remember his name. Jean-Claude.
Jean-Claude, yeah.
And, there was a similar daughter in Syria. Hafiz Assad had a daughter, eldest daughter he loved, who had a great interest in politics. Had she been male, she might have been the successor. And the same was true of in North Korea. The second Kim Jong-il had a daughter who worked alongside him. But in the end, it was Kim Jong-un, one of the sons, but not the oldest. I think the youngest. I'd have to check my book.
Were there any, and again, you go through 20, 25 different dictators, Stalin, Tojo, the Duvalier family, so on and so forth. Were there any admirable children
Oh, yeah.
of monsters that stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, Casey, I wrote this book eons ago, but hang on, let me think.
Well, I think it was about, 2016, 2017?
Sort of an eon in my life. But, well, Svetlana Stalin lived almost an incredible life. And the fact that she wasn't crazier than she was is a great tribute to her. She suffered a lot. Fidel Castro had a defector daughter. There's a lovely man who works in Uganda who is one of the, again, I'd have to check this, 50 or 60 children of Idi Amin. And so on. And some are real chips off the old block.
Of course.
Yeah, little monsterlets of monsters.
Of course.
An outstanding example of this would be one of the two Ceausescu's sons in Romania. But there, we get into nature and nurture, or we could. That couple, that awful couple, Nick and Elena, had two sons, one of whom was a perfect little monster, Niku, and the other of whom was quite normal and benign. I think his name was Valentin, who was a physicist and worked at a scientific laboratory his whole career. Never harmed a hair on anyone's head, so far as I know.
As I recall, to bring things back to where we're originally from, I'm from Portland, Oregon, beautiful little town where people can even succeed from. Not me, obviously, but some folks. But Stalin's granddaughter runs a lovely little boutique in downtown Portland. I've never been, but get good reviews. But that's about the grandchildren.
Just amazing.
What was the most surprising story? Figure, commonality, trend line, from your work on the book of Children of Monsters?
If you had asked me at the time it was published, I would have regaled you with these sparkling. I would have been the best guest.
Let me.
Alicia, I didn't know this was going to happen. What the heck? I mean,
I'm so
I would have
sorry.
studied. I would have studied. My goodness, I've written 5,000 pieces since then. I barely remember.
I
the title.
apologize. I
That's okay.
apologize.
Don't you know what a sieve I am?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so I understand.
I'll give you a nugget. Hitler didn't have children, we all know. But there was a man who believed he was Hitler's child, whose mother told him he was, and who was a dead ringer for him. Now, my main interest is not in whether he was Hitler's son biologically. The fact is he thought he was. What effect did that have on him? Not a good one. Yeah. Very interesting, sad, macabre story. Yeah.
Do you have any other book projects in the works?
So something I can actually talk about fluently?
Not eons ago.
No, I'm just thinking about an upcoming golf lesson. That's all I got.
There's always space on a bookshelf for another golf book.
I'm still stuck on girls don't become dictators.
Yeah, and we've had
Rare are those.
So no, I wouldn't say rare. I would say non-existent. Now, no, it's true we've had some queens who've been not so good, and it's true that I don't know. Indira Gandhi imposed emergency law. She was no dictator, but I believe it is unknown to history.
That's so
I
fascinating.
believe it is unknown to history.
In the modern conception of dictators, as we.
Yeah, and about antiquity, who knows? But I've never heard of any example.
I mean, I guess that just goes to show.
Girls are better.
Yes.
Oh, in every way.
Yeah.
No dispute here whatsoever.
But it's very interesting to look into, though, Denise Duvalier and Bushra Assad. Can't remember the Kim daughter's name. Very interesting. They were proud of their father, of course, and had kind of a taste for it, a taste for what their dad did. Interesting.
Yeah.
But never considered for the dictatorship.
Well, I'm reminded of Gulnara Karimova, the daughter of Islam Karimov of Uzbekistan, who passed, now a while back in 2016. And she was this self-styled pop star and a fashion artist, and ended up being covered by a range of fashion publications. I had no idea who her father was. Thought that she would be chosen by her father as an appointed successor. The power politics in Tashkent went another way. She's been in jail ever since.
I had no idea.
Unfortunately, did not become that
Today,
first.
years old when I learned that. But
She's awful.
Here's an interesting topic related. There have been some wives of dictators who were like co-dictators, or as Mrs. Hoxha called herself, co-fighter. The Hoxhas, the Ceausescus, the woman we called Madame Mao in China.
Yeah.
There have been such dictatorial partners. And other wives have been in the background, like Mrs. Mussolini.
And isn't it book I was reading maybe about a year ago. Isn't thought to be that Jinping's wife is more of a smarter politician than he is?
She seems to play a very important role.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess it goes back to another one of those truisms: behind every great man is a great woman.
Or an ungreat one in this case.
An
Yeah.
ungreat one.
It depends on the definition of great.
Yeah, exactly. A great baddie, or
I love the way the great Jerome Cohen put it. This is the tightest period in China since the Cultural Revolution. The worst, the strictest, the most totalitarian.
yeah,
Yeah, she has accomplished that.
maybe with the help of his wife. It's the country I'm so fascinated with by the most, and like to write about the most. I mean, like, because it's just so.
Is China?
It's China, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're so big and they're in everyone's faces all the time, and they're getting away with it.
Nationalism, Chinese nationalism is one of the strongest forces on earth, even among some Democrats with a small d. And as Perry Link told me once, that's part of the greatness of the late Liu Xiaobo. He transcended that. He was simply for freedom.
Yeah.
It's funny. We were
There are many Chinese exiles who are pro-Beijing, which is frustrating as hell. Chinese people living in the free world
Defies
who are
logic.
very pro-CCP.
Defies logic.
It's, for one thing, it's, dare I use the word, ungrateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'll buy you a ticket.
And I'll add to that insane.
And also among Iranian exiles. Very interesting topic. Go ahead, Casey.
I was going to say, and we see that to an extent with members of the Russian opposition as well. I'm sure you're aware, this famous phrase where the Russian liberal ends at the border of Ukraine. I imagine there's a Chinese counterpart where the Chinese national ends at the border of East Turkestan, of Tibet, so on and so forth.
Khodorkovsky told me that at least half the Russians in London are pro-Putin.
It just doesn't.
And this is one of the things.
I think we should go home.
Go home. Why aren't you home? Why aren't you home?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Go ahead, you love it. Go.
Oh, this is the thing. And again, getting back to conversations about Gary, what makes him so spectacular, obviously as a figure within Human Rights Foundation, but as a Russian exile as well, is that he leaves that all behind. He has been as clear as day that the Ukraine war does not end until the Ukrainian flag flies over Sevastopol once more. There is no thought in his mind whatsoever that Russia has any right to any part of Ukraine. And that was me on my high horse.
There are many.
Good horse.
This may have been 13 years ago. I don't know. I was at some pub outside having a cigarette like the healthy adult. And I started talking to this guy, and he was a Turk, and so I was already fascinated. And so he went on a whole tirade against Obama, talking about how bad Obama was. And I said, well, look at your own country, though. So then, of course, all of my friends are inside, and I'm outside having a political debate about Turkish and American politics. And then I just said to him, so why don't you go home then, if you think it's so bad? And he said, oh, because it's worse there. And I said, okay.
People vote with their feet, don't they?
Yeah.
They absolutely do.
Yeah, Kasparov, he is such a great man and freedom champion. I can forget he's a chess player. He's like Andrei Sakharov. I think of him as such a great dissident human rights hero. I can forget he was one of the great scientists of his age. Boris Nemtsov, murdered within sight of the Kremlin in February 2015, the leader of the opposition. He had his PhD in physics by 25. He was destined for a great career.
Yeah.
Studied with Vitaly Ginzburg, who'd won the Nobel Prize in physics. Anatoly Sharansky, later Natan Sharansky. Real math and science whiz. Liu Xiaobo was one of the best-known literary critics and scholars in China. Fong Lijier, or however you pronounce his name. And I think of him as a great Tiananmen figure. An astrophysicist. I don't know a thing about astrophysics.
Neither do I.
It's funny about that. It's that people who are great in these fields devote themselves to this other. And I believe that, and this is in the Nobel book. This is one thing I remember, Casey. This is in the Nobel book. Sakharov had so much to lose. He was on top of the Soviet heap. He was a top member of the nomenklatura. He had won the Hero of Labor Award like 5 times, Lenin Prize, Stalin Prize, Dacha's, Soviet Academy of Sciences. He had it made. And he threw it all away to stand up for the truth and for justice. He threw it all away to suffer terribly. And I don't care how smart he was very smart. but therein lies his greatness.
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of what Jimmy Lai said. Sebastian, had this quote: "What is wealth, or what any of those things, without freedom for them?"
Jimmy Lai, heavens yes, this great entrepreneur, one of the great entrepreneurs of his time, who had, I believe he's a billionaire, or was. He could have jetted off, as Sharansky said to me in a conversation, he could have jetted off anywhere, put his feet up on the beach. Who could have blamed him? I think he's in his 70s.
73.
He stayed in Hong Kong to be imprisoned.
Yeah,
Didn't have to.
willingly. Yeah.
Well, I have to in quotation marks. Maybe he thinks he did. He probably does.
Yeah.
Jay, this all sounds like wonderful material for your next book, which I'm sure you have all the time in the world for.
You're trying to give me something I can speak about. Thank you, Casey.
Not as if you aren't already juggling plenty. I did want to, again, Jay, we've been talking now for 30, 35 minutes or so. Wanted to make sure to mention that your day job, writing, highlighting, analyzing the realities, the threats of modern dictatorship, and especially those who are...
But then there's my work as a model after hours.
Well, that's exactly. Folks can't see. If you were in the studio with us today, you would understand.
He's got one up on all of us.
Brad Pitt, eat your heart out.
Most
A model from
handsome
Michigan.
guest.
Even from Michigan.
But you also work as, if I understand correctly, a music critic? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Well, maybe a little bit about that. Does that intersect with your work on modern dictatorship in any form?
Or does it just
or
alleviate
fashion?
your mind a little bit?
Are they parallel tracks, or do they reinforce one another in any way?
I like a wall of separation, but sometimes others break down the wall. And occasionally these worlds intersect. What about these musicians who are in the bosom of Putin? What do you do about them? That's a very tricky subject about which I wrote an essay. But no, otherwise, these are completely different worlds with no overlap. And if musicians intrude politics into concerts, I'll comment on it, but not otherwise. I've, there have been some real SOBs in music. Let's begin with Wagner, if you like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, to that end, Jay, maybe you saw as you walked in our office, we have a few framed photos, news clippings of, I believe it's Nicki Minaj, and then Beyonce, and a handful of others who decided it was in their best interest to take millions of dollars from certain dictators, especially, though, children of those dictators in Libya, in Angola. To their credit, some of them returned their funds. I don't believe Nicki Minaj ever did.
I was going to say, Casey, you'll be so pleased. I did remember something from my Dictators book. The Gaddafi children would hire such people. Yeah.
Saeed Gaddafi also donated significant funds, I believe it was to Cambridge University.
Oh, no.
At the time, they were eventually forced to return those funds.
Good.
He was the Gaddafi kid I'm thinking of graduated from the LSE.
Yes, sorry, I misspoke. It was LSE, not Cambridge, yes. Yeah.
I mean, I guess every now and then you could be writing about music and get hit with a Schindler's List score, and that's convergence of the two.
Just happened the other night.
Did it do?
Yeah.
That song gets me every time.
There was a gala evening with John Williams, and Yo-Yo Ma was a guest who played the Williams cello concerto, and for an encore, he played the theme from Schindler's List. Funny you should mention it. It wasn't a month ago.
It guts me. It breaks my heart every time I hear that song and cry every time. It's so beautiful.
No,
and I will hum it for you all after this.
It's an immortal tune.
It is.
Yeah.
You don't want to sing it for us right now?
Well, it's just a score, so, but I can hum it with this nice cold timbre to my voice.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Jay, is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners? Where can they find more of your writing? Where can they find more of your analysis?
You are good, Casey. You were such a pro.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. I only ask this of the most handsome guest, by the way.
Thank you.
That he's insulted off the top of the hour.
I have an archive, what a pompous word. I have an archive, as we all do, at National Review and at the New Criterion. My final word is I'm just so grateful for HRF and the Oslo Freedom Forum. I'm not a big organization man. I think that was the title of a famous book, wasn't it? The Organization Man.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But God, I love these entities. They mean a great deal to me. And I'm very much anti-tribal. But if this is a tribe, I would like to be at least an honorary member.
I think you are, and that means a lot to us.
You are welcome anytime.
You're definitely a part of the tribe. Will we see you in Oslo?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Wonderful.
All right. We're not far away.
We'll continue the conversation there then.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you so
study
much.
up, Casey.
Yes, please do. And we'll leave a link in the show notes to the books as well.
Trying to outgrow my humble Midwestern roots.
One book at a time, one
One
son,
archive
one
at a
daughter,
time.
one baby doc at a time.
I'm going to throw all the Michigan idioms at you I can think of.
Oh my gosh, you have to.
Honest to God. Yeah.
We'll just wrap this up by saying, I believe it's Go Blue.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
There we are.
Redeemed yourself right at the end.
Good job, Casey. Thanks a
Took me a
million.
while.
Go blue, baby.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
The Human Rights Foundation is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that promotes and protects human rights globally, with a focus on closed societies. We promote freedom where it's most at risk, in countries ruled by authoritarian regimes.